Gators Breakdown, because there's never a dull moment in Gator Nation.
The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And a busy day here. Look, I had planned on doing a instant reaction to the Florida Gator 2021 football schedule being released today, coming at you right on the heels of that. I mean, the SEC Network show is still going on right now, but look, I wanted to talk about it anyway. They gave us a They gave us a hint yesterday that this was going to come here on Wednesday the 27th. So all the way from January, they released a schedule that we won't get to see until September. So we were all waiting because, look, there were a lot of things going on with this schedule, with the way 2020 and the way that schedule happened and an all-SEC schedule. Would anything change as far as the 2021 schedule goes? And it did not. Everything that was put into place as far as who you were going to play in conference stayed that way. Some teams are playing each other twice in the same season. If there were SEC East, SEC West games like Georgia and Arkansas, they played last year. That was an added game. And they play their scheduled game that in 2021 like it was going to be scheduled anyway. So a lot to get into here. Brian Johnson now going on to the NFL and to the Philadelphia Eagles as a quarterback coach. That kind of broke today out of nowhere, but much, to the surprise of everyone. I think we've talked about staff movements a good bit the last couple of weeks, and now it's Brian Johnson, and UCF just opened up. I thought he could be a name to take that job with Josh Heupel going to Tennessee, but yeah, I still wonder if somebody would ask him to be a head coach in college. I know he just took this job. I know it just got announced, but UCF just opened up too in the last couple of days. Last night it was kind of coming out that Josh Heupel was going to take the Tennessee job. Would UCF go ask Brian Johnson anyway, even though he's just taking that job for the Philadelphia Eagles? So I still think that could be something to watch out for. Very interesting to see if something like that happens. But hey, let's get into all this would be a shorter episode here. I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on the schedule, give you guys a schedule. If you didn't get to watch it, I know it's out there on Twitter. You can check it all out. Florida put it out there as well of the schedule. But give my thoughts on the schedule, how it shakes out, and Brian Johnson moving on to the NFL. Before we get there, remember you can find Gators Breakdown at news4jax.com or your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching on YouTube right now, a few of you are. I know it's just kind of a surprise on everyone, but hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching the replay, do the same thing. Help us out here on Gators Breakdown. But here we go. Let's get into it, and I will pop it up. Here's the graphic from the University of Florida put out here, and let's just quickly go through the games, and then we'll break it down just a bit. September 4th, Florida Atlantic. The very next week at South Florida. Alabama, week 3 on the 2021 schedule. Then Tennessee in the Swamp the very next week on September 25th. Then October 2nd, the Gators go to Kentucky, then host Vanderbilt, then go on the road to LSU on October 16th. And then there's the bye week in between LSU, and then on October 30th, Halloween weekend, Florida, Georgia in Jacksonville. Next week after that, November 6th, South Carolina, then Samford. So, the easier adult conference games are showing back up here. And then Missouri on November 20th. And then Florida State is back on the schedule in the Swamp on November 27th. So the first thing here is, look at this. You didn't have your adult conference games in 2020. We get those back now. Opening up, Willie Taggart. You get to play Willie Taggart again anyway. He's the head coach of Florida Atlantic. That's going to be the opening game for the Gators as they travel to the Swamp. So all the changes going on at FSU. Willie Taggart no longer there, but he's going to get another crack at the Gators, this time with a Florida Atlantic uniform on. And then, the road game, quote-unquote road game in Tampa, South Florida. That game would be in Raymond James Stadium. You can best bet there's probably still going to be more Gator fans than Bulls fans there. So, you're traveling. Yes, a road game, but, for recruiting purposes and all that stuff, I think that's one reason, Florida didn't mind doing it's a 2-for-1. I think Florida gets 2 home games out of this series, 1 game at Tampa. The first game will be on the road in the series for Florida at South Florida there. So, Jules Montanaro returning to his school that he just left, the new Florida cornerback coach and recruiting coordinator. So he'll get to play his former team in his first year in orange and blue. And then the big one, third week of the season, September, I think that's 18th. Can't see it. Yeah, September 18th, Alabama comes to the Swamp in a very, very early season game. Florida opens up SEC play with a rematch from last year's SEC title game. Alabama comes to town. A lot of changes for both teams on the offensive side of the ball, quarterbacks, receivers, all that stuff. Alabama probably has an easier time with the way they recruit, but you do catch them early. As we just said, there's a lot of change going on for Alabama as well. You're catching them early in the year. They play Miami week 1, then Mercer week 2, I believe, and then they'll come to the Swamp on the third game of the season. Man, you're opening up the SEC in style, and the Swamp will be rocking. Swamp will be rocking for sure when Alabama comes to town that early in the season. You hope it doesn't derail a season if you happen to lose that game in the third week of the season. But it works out this time to where Alabama is the rotation opponent for the SEC West this time. I don't think the game will look much like the SEC championship game we just saw about a month ago. But this one's ready to get excited for. Hopefully, the Swamp is able to be packed. Hopefully COVID's by the wayside, and we'll see where it goes. Hopefully we're able to have a full capacity in the Swamp if everything's okay. And, that will be the first game of the Swamp will be rocking. Yeah, you get FAU week 1. You'll be happy if everything's kind of close to normal with a full Swamp and full tailgating and all that stuff. But it won't hit in earnest until Alabama rolls into town on week 3. Then you roll back around. Another home game. The very next week, Josh Heupel just hired at Tennessee this morning and all that, and he's going to return to the state of Florida from UCF to Tennessee, return to the state of Florida to face the Gators on September 25th at home, a home game for the Gators. So back-to-back home games there, Alabama and Tennessee 2 weeks in a row. But look at this, folks. Florida Atlantic, South Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, all those games are in the state of Florida. So Florida will not leave the state the first month of the season. And as I said, that game at South Florida is going to be pretty much a home game as well with a lot of Gator fans in that stadium. They'll pack it out there in Tampa as well. So, I mean, the schedule breaks pretty good early on while you have all these new pieces, while you have Emory Jones in that running game trying to come to form, trying to figure out all the differences on defense with the new coaching staff, and we're replacing a lot of players there in the secondary, trying to get that shored up there. So you look at the schedule here, and you don't have to travel a whole lot. And hopefully, like I said, COVID's by the wayside. Either way, it wouldn't be that much of a factor for Florida. You're not traveling a lot here in the first month of the season. So the first month, once again, Florida Atlantic at South Florida, hosting Alabama, hosting Tennessee. Then we get into October, and the Florida Gators will go to the Kentucky Wildcats on October 2nd. So, we know how close those games have been in recent years, how hard fought those games have been in recent years. Florida will return to Kentucky for the first time since Kyle Trask took over for Felipe Franks, and the Gators offense takes off since. We'll see how that game goes. Looks like, Kentucky's got trying to get their quarterback situation figured out. Mark Stoops returns for another year. Eddie Grant's going as offensive coordinator there for Kentucky, but that'll be your first game in October. Florida will follow that up with an October 9th hosting Vanderbilt on October 9th. My bad. At Kentucky, October 2nd, hosting Vanderbilt on October 9th. And then the next week on the road in Baton Rouge, October 16th, Florida and LSU. Hopefully some kind of payback game for the Gators there from this past year. You'll be looking forward to that. And look, you get Kentucky, Vanderbilt 2 weeks before. You'll be coming off of Alabama and Tennessee. Then you get Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and then you get LSU going to Baton Rouge, a game that always has a lot of emotion. Max Johnson seems to be the quarterback that's going to be locked in there for LSU. He really came out versus Florida this past year, but they're making a lot of changes too. They're just fired Bo Pelini after 1 year at defensive coordinator. So they got some changes as well. So interesting game right there in the middle of the season is October 16th. Florida will travel to Baton Rouge and take on the LSU Tigers. Then the bye week, and then, of course, Georgia in Jacksonville, October 30th. So, you kind of look at the schedule a bit, and you kind of break it up into pairs. You got Alabama, Tennessee back-to-back. Then it eases up a bit. Kentucky, Vanderbilt back-to-back. Yes, there's the bye week after that, but you get LSU, bye week, Georgia. So LSU and Georgia back-to-back. if the season goes as you think it will, if you just kind of look at it, most people are going to predict a loss to Alabama. So you're more than likely one loss going into Georgia LSU or LSU Georgia. And it probably makes or break your season right there. LSU and Georgia back to back. That's the season. Cause look, even if you beat Alabama, it's going to come down to LSU and Georgia with the way, we'll take a look at some other schedules here too of teams in the conference, especially Georgia, because that's your main competition in the East. But the season's going to come down to LSU and Georgia, those back-to-back games, no matter what happens versus Alabama. But you beat Alabama early in the year, and it puts even more importance on those games if you're college football playoff run, all that good stuff. But just looking ahead here, I'm not predicting that or anything. As I said, most people are going to predict. I would lean also Alabama beating Florida here earlier on in the year, but a lot hinges on that LSU bye week Georgia stretch there for the Gators. After Georgia, November 6th at South Carolina. So as we just kind of mentioned at the beginning of the season, Florida spends so much time in the state of Florida, starting with the October 16th game at LSU. Gators won't be in the swamp for a while. You got that game versus Georgia in Jacksonville. So it would be on the road at LSU, a bye week on the road at South Carolina, and then you're back in the swamp on November 13th versus Samford. So, you go to South Carolina the week after playing Georgia. Yeah, I hope you're not licking your wounds in that game. It's pretty unique, Florida playing South Carolina the week after Georgia. Recent memory, I don't remember that being the case. Florida has played South Carolina the week before Georgia before. Maybe a bye week in there. I think 2012 was the one game I remember there. Florida dominates South Carolina and then loses to Georgia in Jacksonville. But kind of look at their unique situation there of playing Shane Beamer his first year at South Carolina the week after Georgia. Then I mentioned back home November 13th versus Samford. And then you go on the road November 20th versus Missouri. And boy, could that be a cold game. I know we looked at last year, this past season, going to Tennessee and played in a very cold game later in the year, first week of December, I believe. But now you go to Missouri November 20th, and man, you don't like that cold weather. And this Florida boy here doesn't like that cold weather. But Florida performed okay there at Tennessee in some cold weather. But something worth bringing up there. November 20th versus Missouri. That game's usually about a week or two earlier. When you look at it, sometimes it's a week after Georgia, sometimes it's 2 weeks after the Georgia game. So about a week later than it normally is for the Gators. And then here we go, the season finale once again, something we missed out on in 2020 with the big out-of-conference games. Not only the small out-of-conference games, the cupcakes, the games you should win. Well, FSU's in that category too, but here we go. You get your ACC rivals back in the SEC. Florida versus Florida State. The last time these two teams played, it was a home game for the Gators. It's going to stay that way. The rotation is going to stay the same. So Florida State will travel to Gainesville, and it'll be the first time Florida faces Mike Norvell, the head coach there at Florida State. Since you didn't play the Seminoles in 2020, you get the first crack at Mike Norvell November 27th as Florida State comes to Gainesville on the season finale of the 2021 football season. So there we go. That's how it breaks out one more time. Florida Atlantic, South Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, LSU. Get your bye week before Georgia, South Carolina, Samford, Missouri, Florida State. As I said, just kind of looking at it here, the stretch, of course, getting Bama early in the year, I think that's the highlight. You're opening up the SEC schedule with Alabama, back-to-back home games, Alabama, Tennessee. But, Florida doesn't have the 3-game stretch or the 4-game stretch that's really difficult here. It's kind of broken up in 2 stretches, 2 pairs, Alabama, Tennessee, back-to-back. Not saying Tennessee with Josh Heupel, he's going to make them much better or anything, but that game is coming the week after Alabama. And there's the stat out there, and we hit it this past year or two, looking at 2020, the year after or the week after playing Alabama, how a team performs out there. And sometimes it isn't too good. But look, A&M beat Florida this past year, the week after A&M played Alabama. So, it's a stat that's out there that's okay to look at, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot. Better teams usually win the game. But as I said, you break it up into pairs here. Alabama, Tennessee back-to-back, LSU, Georgia back-to-back with a bye week in between. not a heavy stretch for the Gators anywhere on the season. So the schedule broke out pretty well as far as that. There's no 3-game stretch or no 4-game stretch. That's really tough for the Gators with all this changing on offense and all the coaching changes on defense. And the bye week comes before Georgia. No surprise there. And that's the way it will break out. We'll try something new here. Let me try and share the screen here on StreamYard as we will take a look at the rest of the SEC schedule here, if I can get that to work. And boom, that should work. There we go. Some early season highlights. Some early season out-of-conference games that we should get excited about. Of course, looking at the Gator schedule, but man, I mean, looking at the SEC schedule is a lot of fun too. And I mean, Alabama, Miami, week 1 in Atlanta. That'd be a fun game to watch. Georgia, Clemson. That'd be a top 4 matchup probably if you look at all these early season polls. Both teams really in the top 4 in every poll that you look at right now. So, Georgia could already have a loss on the season. Won't mean much for the SEC standings, but you take a look at it, and that's just the way it's going to break out. They play Clemson week 1. JT Daniels and that offense coming back. Lose a lot on defense this Georgia. Clemson's getting a lot of defensive pieces back from a somewhat disappointing defense to go against JT Daniels in that Georgia offense. So that'd be a fun game to watch, get a really good litmus test for the beginning of the season. I mean, that game's going to be hyped up. And there's your primetime game right there, week 1. We know that. Georgia Clemson. Something to look forward to as we look, hopefully, as I said, hopefully everything stays the same and with this schedule and the way COVID worked out. I think we could probably feel pretty safe now. You went through a complete college football season successfully with COVID. It should lighten up a bit. Try and keep the schedule as much the same as you can. But all I'll say as far as that goes. LSU at UCLA should be a pretty interesting coaching or game there. LSU, UCLA, Chip Kelly, UCLA still there, and all the changes, as we mentioned, going on at LSU. So you get that game the first week of the season, and who knows where LSU will be. Can they continue to build on their late season performance like they did versus Florida and Ole Miss last year and keep it going? And UCLA, it'll be a statement for them to beat an SEC team they start the 2021 season. No other big games as far as September 4th and that. September 6th, that'll be that Labor Day night. Ole Miss and Louisville in Atlanta. So you got Alabama versus Miami. That'll be that Saturday game in Atlanta. And then on Monday night, you'll get Ole Miss and Louisville. Let's scroll down a bit, and here we go. So look, Mercer, Alabama, look, that's usually not worth bringing up, but it is worth bringing up because that's the game the week before Alabama plays Florida. So Alabama opens up with Miami. They get Mercer week 2, so they get a breather. They get a quote-unquote bye week there the week before they play Florida. Georgia has UAB that week. SEC play Missouri and Kentucky. And NC State, Mississippi State, pretty good game there. South Carolina, East Carolina. Pitt at Tennessee. So there, that'd be Josh Heupel's first big game as his head coach as an ACC school comes into Knoxville, and then Texas A&M versus Colorado. That game will be in Denver. Here we go, September 18th, as we already know. Alabama at Florida, but Auburn and Penn State. Man, that should be a pretty good game. Auburn traveling to Happy Valley. So I wonder if they'll do the whiteout, the night game there. That's something to look forward to as Auburn goes to Penn State. South Carolina at Georgia. So Shane Beamer's first big in-conference game there will be versus the Georgia Bulldogs. September 25th, the highlight there. Let's see. Let me scroll back up here. Texas A&M, Arkansas in the neutral site game. That's where Tennessee, Florida is. LSU, Mississippi State. Not too good of a week there if you look at the SEC and SEC teams playing each other. October 2nd, Auburn, LSU probably highlights that week a bit. Arkansas, Georgia, they get to play each other, like we said, 2 weeks or 2 years in a row. And then Ole Miss, Alabama. That was a fun game last year. We'll see if they can duplicate that on October 2nd. October 9th, remember, Georgia and Auburn do not play each other in November anymore. That game has been moved up into the season. It happened in 2020 for the first time. Going to happen again in 2021. Georgia at Auburn, October 9th. That's the week Florida plays Vanderbilt. LSU, Kentucky, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama at Texas A&M. So pretty good week there for October 9th and for the SEC. October 16th, you'll get the highlight there, Florida and LSU, and not other many games there that will garner much attention. Kentucky at Georgia sometimes is an ugly slugfest type of game. We'll see if we get another one of those. But Auburn, Arkansas probably could be fun. Could be a fun game. October 23rd, that's the week Florida and Georgia have their bye week. Tennessee and Alabama is the highlight of that week. And, well, let's see. This thing's freezing up a little bit. Let's see if it will get to the next part of the schedule, as you can see here. And October 30th, Ole Miss, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, highlights there, November 6th. So you get Florida, Georgia back-to-back, then or Florida, Georgia 1 week. The next week, LSU and Alabama will highlight the week. That's the week Florida and South Carolina are going at it. Auburn, Texas A&M could be fun as well. November 13th, it's the week Florida plays at Samford, so you can watch a lot of these other SEC games. You don't have to pay too much attention to Florida Samford if you don't want to. Mississippi State and Auburn, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Georgia and Tennessee. That's pretty much taken the place of Georgia Auburn. That game is moving later in the year as well with Florida or with Georgia Auburn moving earlier in the year. November 20th, Arkansas, Alabama, Florida at Missouri. Not many highlights there. Auburn, South Carolina is the game there. November 27th, the season finale. We get our Iron Bowl is back. We get our ACC versus SEC matchups. So it should be fun again, November 27th. Thanksgiving weekend kind of hopefully is in the traditional way we can think about it. Look, I really enjoyed the all-SEC schedule. Overall, I enjoyed it more, but I also want these out-of-conference games that we get with the ACC. Scheduling is a whole other conversation we can have. But I do miss these games. I did miss these games this past year, but a lot to look forward to. For this 2021 schedule. We get back to the 12-game schedule, get back to SEC, get back to SEC versus ACC, and a lot of fun to be had with the schedule. Starting early for the Gators, week 3, when Alabama rolls to Gainesville to take on the Gators. So, all right, there we go. That'll be that's it for the 2021 Gators schedule. And there's the instant reaction there. Pretty good schedule overall, I think. Like I said, not too difficult except for the fact Alabama comes in. But as far as the way the schedule lays out, not that bad. So here we go. Before we wrap up, let's get into Brian Johnson, the news that broke today. He's going to the NFL, going to the Philadelphia Eagles to coach quarterbacks. No surprise there. He's been interviewed quite a bit this offseason. Of course, the Boise State head coaching job, the South Carolina offensive coordinator job, but it's going to end up him going to the NFL to be the quarterback coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. I still say watch out to see if UCF maybe garners his interest in being a head coach there. As I said, I'm not sure anybody really predicted Heupel going to Tennessee, even though their athletic director Danny White went to Tennessee. But they reach out, get Heupel to be the head coach at Tennessee, and then that opens up UCF. So if it's me in UCF, I'm still calling to garner interest and see if he's interested in being a head coach. But right now, Brian Johnson will not be in the booth calling plays, sharing play calling duties with Dan Mullen for the 2021 Gators. Look, he's absolutely an asset, but it doesn't mean that the transition to a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback coach, won't be seamless. Two things can be true at the same time. He's an asset, but he can be replaced. And my thought behind that is this is still Dan Mullen's offense. Dan Mullen still has a great reputation of developing quarterbacks. He has a history of it, a long history of it. Florida will be fine without Brian Johnson being the offensive coordinator here and the quarterback coach. He absolutely can be good. He is good. That's why he's getting the job. But it doesn't mean he's not replaceable. He's absolutely replaceable. And the damage is minimal here to me. And I think we can do that while still admitting Johnson brought a lot to the table. Really good recruiter. So my thing for Florida is you have to hire at least a good recruiter in this spot because I believe Dan Mullen can take care of the quarterback part of it, the quarterback development part of it, calling plays on game day. I know some want Mullen to be more of that CEO role as a head coach, but at least for this part of it, if he's not going to just take that CEO role, he'll be fine developing quarterbacks. He'll be fine calling ball plays. So I think the damage is minimal here with Brian Johnson leaving. And I don't want to make it sound like I wasn't grateful for the offense when Kyle Trask and developing Kyle Trask. It's not what I'm trying to say at all. It's just, I think it'd be okay. I think it's okay with Mullen, given his acumen, given his pedigree of developing quarterbacks, calling plays. Florida would be fine just in that regard. And Mullen was not caught off guard here. As I just said, Johnson had a lot of interviews in the last month or so with other schools. The interest was there. Mullen knew that. You don't think he's just sitting by the wayside and just was surprised that he doesn't have somebody already in mind that he wants? Probably a few guys already in mind. I know Tom Herman from Texas head coach, former offensive coordinator under Urban Meyer, is a hot name that's kind of being brought up through Gator Nation right now, especially because of the Urban Meyer connection. How long would he be here? I think that's the first thing you ask yourself. Would he mesh well with Dan Mullen? He probably could learn a little as far as, Florida and Texas, very similar in how they are programs in highly competitive, football crazy, recruit heavy states. Probably can learn a little bit under Dan Mullen. I know people were a little disappointed with the way the season ended for Florida, but it was far from the kind of, I won't necessarily say dumpster fire with Tom Herman in Texas, but it wasn't what they were expecting when Tom Herman was hired. A lot of people thought that was a great hire for Texas, that he would bring them back, and he didn't. So, would he come mentor under Dan Mullen for a season or two? I usually don't let, he's only going to be here for a year. I don't usually let that scare me away from hires, because if he is that good and he is leaving after a year, more than likely he still held up the bargain. He still, he'll be getting another job because he did some good things in just that 1 year. So I don't, you don't want to be shuffling coaches, but I'm not trying to compare Saban or Mullen to Saban, but it can be done. Saban has a car wash of coaches, just rolls them in, rolls them out. And the success is just usually pretty there on the same level year after year after year. So it can be done. It can be done. And especially if it's on the offensive side of the ball, where Dan Mullen, that's his acumen, that's his pedigree. I wouldn't let it worry me if a coach is coming in only for a year or so. Go get me a recruiter that's also a good coach. Don't get me wrong. You got to be able to coach as well. But the person has to at least be able to recruit. That he has to have that. You can't take a drop in recruiting here for the Gators. Brian Johnson was one of the best recruiters on staff. You got to at least replace that part of it. Get somebody that can coach as well, but I do need somebody that can recruit, help this Gator recruiting staff as well. How much of a difference would it actually make? I don't know. But you don't want it to be worse. You don't want it to be worse on the recruiting front. So we'll keep an we'll keep an ear out for replacements, and of course we'll break it down here when a hire's made or all that good stuff. I'm glad you guys joined me. Good bit of you joining me right now on YouTube. Thank you so much for that on the short notice. They're trying to keep it under wraps a bit for doing the instant reaction. Wasn't sure the timeline of the SEC, how quickly they were going to go through the schedule and all that. But good kudos on them. I was just kind of waiting for them to all put it out at one time so we can kind of compare weeks and all that good stuff. But thanks for joining me here on this 30-minute episode of Gators Breakdown. Some good stuff here, breaking down the 2021 schedule and Brian Johnson leaving for the NFL. I'm the host of Gators Breakdown, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. Guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.